so much for coming. We know there's a lot going on at the moment with marking and with writing dissertations, as we've just been discussing. So we very much appreciate you coming to this last seminar in the Childhood Today series. It's a real privilege to be presenting with Dr. Babs Anderson today on just some of the research that we've been doing in terms of child poverty. We do want this to be an informal session, so if there's anything that we say that we're not being clear about, please do be brave and stick up your hand and ask for clarification. We want this to be helpful to people. Also, at the end, there will be an opportunity. We're going to present for about 40 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, so please do feel free, because I know those questions will help us as we kind of hone our thinking. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing and the rationale behind that, and then Babs is going to talk about kind of the next steps for our research and where we're looking to go. So, first of all, why our research project? You will have heard in the news and in a whole range of different areas that parenting is high on the agenda. And as people who are working within the field of early childhood, we are always talking to our students about the role of parenting and the importance that that has, particularly on children in their early years. Lots of people are talking about this. There's a lot of government rhetoric around this aspect. Cameron said in 2010, and has continued to say, what matters most to a child's life chances is not the wealth of their upbringing, but the warmth of their parenting. And in some ways we would critique that as a department because we think it's both and. But there is a lot of rhetoric within the government, within the media, and within society at large around this key issue of parenting and the importance of parenting and the impact that parenting can have on children. So our research very much started with a key review that Frank Field MP undertook in 2010 called the Foundation Years, Preventing Poor Children Becoming Poor Adults. And Field was commissioned by the government to undertake an impartial review looking at children living in situations of socio-economic deprivation and the impact that that experience has on children in terms of their future life chances. Positive outcomes for children in their early years in terms of their present experience, but also their future life chances, are often significantly weakened by the impact of poverty. And that's very much what Field's work showed and Tickle's work, amongst others, in terms of if children are living in poverty at an early age, it has significant impact upon them in terms of how they experience life then, but also the impact that that can have on their future. And this, as I say, is reiterated amongst a whole range of the literature that we were looking at to kind of underpin the research that we then wanted to undertake. One of the key supporting pieces of research that we looked at as well was a big research project that was undertaken by Save the Children called Child Poverty in 2012, It Shouldn't Happen Here. And Whittam, the author of that research, showed that the gap in holistic development between children living in poverty and children unaffected by poverty was shown to emerge as early as 22 months of age. And this leads to significant differences in later life in terms of a child's opportunity to thrive. So we can look at a child at 22 months of age and we can very much predict their future life outcomes in terms of the context that they are living within at that age of 22 months, which is obviously very, very young, in a whole range of different aspects in terms of maybe their educational achievement or their social development or their physical development, a whole range of different areas. So this is kind of summarised in the kind of foundation that we then built our research on. Tickle says this: a child's future choices, attainment, well-being, happiness and resilience are profoundly affected by the quality of the guidance, love and care they receive during their early years. And so therefore, the researchers were very much pairing this understanding that children are very much affected by the context that they're living within in their early years in terms of whether they're living in an area of social deprivation or not, economic deprivation or not, but also the impact that that has on their parents and the importance of the parenting that they receive in their early years. Lots of people, again, have been talking about this. Parental relationships clearly influence the holistic development of the child, and thus evidence points to the role of the parent in terms of the determination of their child's life chances. So there was this pairing of the important role of the parent, but also the context that the child is living in, and how actually is there a correlation between children living in poverty and the impact that this has on parenting. And the research showed that there was. What parents do in terms of their parenting is more important than who they are, especially in the child's earliest years. The right kind of parenting is a bigger influence on their future than wealth, class, education, or any other common social factor. So Alan was very much saying that it's the important role of the parents, but then researchers were building on this and showing that the strain of living in poverty has been shown to add pressure to the family experience. So therefore, the impact of living in a situation of poverty has a huge impact on those parents who are often trying their best in terms of bringing up their children. So there was a lot of literature around, and this is very much what we pulled together in terms of where we wanted to go with our research project. And we very much wanted to think, well, what can be done to support parents living in areas of socio-economic deprivation in terms of supporting them in this important role of their parenting. And as you know, there's been a whole range of different interventions that have been put in place. Things like Sure Start, you will have heard of, children's centres. But the research was pointing to the fact that actually parents who often need this kind of support most aren't the parents who are accessing these interventions. You may well have heard in the media of things like the yummy mummy who accesses the children's centre, who really wasn't supposed to be accessing that form of support. It was targeted at a very different family grouping and socio-economic situation. However, it was found that researchers found that often it's parents who need this kind of intervention most who aren't accessing it. Actually, is one of these researchers who's found this correlation. He says it is the parents who would potentially gain most from formal interventions who are least likely to access professional help and support agencies. And so therefore his research very much focused on, well, what do these parents access? What would support these parents most authentically? And his research found that it was actually informal social support structures that are understood to be a valuable resource for adequately engaging with these parents. So it's the informal social support that these parents are accessing and using in terms of supporting them in this important role, particularly in areas of child poverty. And so this is very much what we focused on in terms of our research. Friendship, in particular, are seen as being valued in a new way, providing egalitarian social and emotional support and a sense of collectivity. So what is it about this informal social support network that parents who are living in poverty find attractive? When they don't attend the children's centres and they don't engage with Sure Start, but they are engaging with informal social support networks, what is it that's attractive to them in that context that they're finding supportive in terms of this important role of parenting within the context of poverty? Alongside this, we very much wanted our research to have impact. We wanted our research to be useful. The literature that I've just very briefly gone over was really interesting to us, but we wanted to kind of ask that question, well, so what? What's the importance behind this? And at the same time, we started working with the Birkenhead Foundation Years Project. This is actually a project that was set up by Frank Field MP over on the Wirral in an area of very high child poverty rates. And he very much wanted to take the outcome of his review and he wanted to put it into practice. So all of the interventions that his review found to be helpful, he very much wanted to see if they worked in a local context. So we started to work with the Birkenhead Foundation Years Project, and they had also found that their parents weren't accessing children's centres, weren't accessing the whole Sure Start opportunities that were available to them. Instead, their parents were accessing informal social support networks, particularly community toddler groups, which were running in the locality. And they wanted us to collaborate with them and to research and find out what is it that these parents find so attractive about these community toddler groups. Why is it that they're going along to this when there's the big glossy children's centre up the road, which is potentially far more professional. They have trained professionals on hand to support and to help the parents, whereas actually the parents very much wanted to go to the untrained local community group that was meeting often in a church hall with very low grade toys, very, very different between the two. But there was something very unique about those community toddler groups that the parents found attractive, and they wanted us to help them to explore what it was in that context. So to do this, as I said, we did work with the Birkenhead Foundation Years Trust in terms of collaborating with them. We undertook 54 interviews at 5 different community toddler groups across the Wirral, all situated within the context of the Wirral, but in 2 very different areas. So one in West Wirral and one in East Wirral. West Wirral is one of the areas of the highest level of child poverty in the country. Did I say West Wirral? I meant East Wirral, whereas West Wirral is very different to that. So we were able to compare and contrast the experience of 2 very different demographics of parents and their children in the early years. And the aim of this research was to talk to parents about their reasons as to why they attended the groups and the impact that they felt that these informal social support networks that they were building had for themselves and also for their children. So what was the relevance, or what was the attractiveness about these groups that made them want to come along and to engage with this form of intervention rather than the Sure Start centres or the children's centres as they were at that stage instead. So just to clarify our aim, the aim was ultimately to begin to understand the impact of this informal social support intervention for children in their early years in terms of their present experience, but also looking long term to the impact that it has on their future life chances, building in with what Field and the Birkenhead Foundation Years Trust are trying to evidence in their work. And it was really, really interesting, the results that we found. And I think we were quite surprised by some of the results in terms of how clear they were and how passionately the parents spoke about their experience of these community-based toddler groups. Very much, it was very clear that these parents were accessing these groups for informal social support. And the research had spoken about that. The literature that we had looked at previously had indicated that this may be what we would find, but overwhelmingly this was the result from our research. So parents said things like, it gave, meaning the group, gave me time to talk to my friends. I know my child is safe whilst I socialise. I can meet people. The group provides me with peer support. I'm able to talk through difficult situations with my friends. I like speaking to other people who are going through the same thing as me, and I can talk to other parents about the challenges I face. All the kind of things that children's centres were supposed to do, but obviously aren't in this context. The parents were very much finding somewhere a safe environment where they could build friendships, and it was within the context of this friendship that they were receiving the support that they felt that they needed within the context that they were living in terms of bringing up their children. And when we tried to unpick these results a little bit further, we found that they fit within 2 different or 2 key themes that the parents kept talking about. So it was very much that they were accessing these community toddler groups for informal social support, but what was it about that informal support that they felt that they received as a parent, and what impact did that have on their child? And they talked about 2 different themes. Firstly, the research showed that the informal social support networks maintain their parental mental well-being. And this very much fit in with Frank Field's review of children, of parents, and the impact that living in poverty can have on parents. So parents were very clearly saying things like, it gives me an excuse to get out of the house, or I go stir crazy. I attend the toddler group for some sanity. It's a stress relief knowing you can escape. I intend to fill my day, to give purpose to my day. It was very clear that these parents were accessing this informal social support network because they wanted to ensure their own mental well-being. They wanted to support their own mental well-being, and they felt that that had a real impact in terms of then their ability to parent within the context that they were living in. The second key theme that very clearly came out from the research was that they felt that the social support networks that were provided within the context of a community toddler group was that parents were provided with informal peer parenting education. So instead of going to the children's centre to be taught how to parent by a professional, they actually learned how to parent with their friends. As they saw their friends engaging with their own children, as they saw the untrained professionals within the community toddler group talking to the children and reading to the children, as they saw their friends disciplining their children, they actually learned from that. And they found that a much more accessible way in terms of peer parenting education than being taught how to parent, maybe in a more formal structure. So they said things like, I like to see how the other mums deal with their children. I receive peer education concerning feeding, sleeping patterns. I attend the group because I value the parenting support I receive. I like speaking to other mums who have just been through it. We can share experiences. So very interesting in terms of parents feeling that they were learning how to parent within this context, within this relaxed, informal context. So we took these findings. This was the result of a small scoping study that we undertook. And we've tried to disseminate some of these findings in a range of ways. Obviously, because we're working within a university, we've had these research results published within a journal. But also, more importantly to us, we've tried to think about how we can use these results to impact the work of local practitioners. So we've done things like we've had focus groups with the practitioners themselves, the people who are leading these community toddler groups, to try and get them to unpick some of the results and to see if they feel that what we found is correct. And they found that this has been really helpful in terms of having an impact on the work that they're doing. We've also been meeting regularly with the Birkenhead Foundation Years Project to talk to them about some of these findings, and these findings are now impacting the way that they develop their research and their work, their interventions into the future. So we're just at the stage now where we're going to take these results and we're going to think about, okay, well, how can we now develop this and how can we use this? And Babs is just going to come and talk to us for a few minutes about, okay, so what's the next step? Thanks, Babs.
Right, so what we're going to do now is actually, if we know community toddler groups work and the Sure Start centres are having to move towards a more targeted service, so they're not universal services where all parents can come and mix with other people with children between the ages of birth to 5, then we need to actually explore what is it that community toddler groups actually do, and if we can unpick what they do, can we provide a model that will enable all community toddler groups to evaluate their success in the relationship to what works with the community toddler groups that we've actually seen. So that's our first step, is to identify what works, and we're just on the very beginnings of developing that. The intention is to create a draft environment rating index for the community toddler group. And when we're talking about the environment rating index, what we mean is the social environment, the physical environment. It's not just what's actually there, the fabric. It's about the culture, the ethos, what actually works. So we've developed, as I say, a draft environment rating index, and our next job is to actually take that to the focus group of practitioners to see if they can actually, first of all, agree with it. Is that what they're aiming to achieve? To see if they can help us create a schedule or a range of from, okay, not great practice to best practice. So that will help everyone who runs a community toddler group to say, actually, we're probably on 3 on the scale. And I can see what 5 looks like because I've got a description here. I maybe can see if I can implement that in my practice to make it even more successful. So this is how we're moving on, hopefully, with that. So we've got to gain their opinions on the index, and it's not just about asking their opinions, it's about acting on them. So what we're going to do is present a model. They will give their opinions. We will review and revise the model so that it actually works, and then we'll see how it really does work by piloting it. So that's the intention, to take the work forward. So what I'm going to do now is just to go through a range of the indices as part of the index, okay? So it's easier to show you than to talk. So let's have a look. So the first one is the organisation. How do parents with young children find out about community toddler groups? Is it by word of mouth? Is it you go to the toddler group in the church hall where your mum went? What happens if you're new to the area? How do you find out about a community toddler group? Because Sure Start centres, glossy leaflets in doctors' surgeries, but that may not be what a vulnerable parent is looking for. Okay, so it's publicity. Then we're looking at info for parents, including a website. We're looking at the records to see how do community toddler groups work out, are they reaching a wide range of parents? Looking at the staff. Certainly some of the staff, as Alex said, that we talk to, they may not be professional, trained, early childhood professionals, but there's something about them that actually makes them able to do the job extremely effectively. And it isn't about wearing a t-shirt with a Sure Start Children's Centre name on it. It's something more than that. Okay, so to work out what is about the staff, then it's to work out about the liaison with other agencies, including signposting. One of the advantages of a community toddler group I spotted was an example of a parent with a child who had particular behavioural issues, and the community toddler group was able to talk to that, the parent and the child, and just suggest that there was a way forward with another agency that may help. Now that's what Sure Start centres intend to do, but this was done in such a low-key way. It wasn't telling the parent that they could or they should. It was just highlighting that these are the kinds of support that might be available for you if you're interested. Very much lower key, but I hope you realise less threatening, less challenging to the parent's sense of self as a parent. And then we looked at the session routine. And again, although that seems quite kind of basic and fundamental, I found one of the most successful toddler groups that I went to, actually, the reason they were really successful was they offered bacon butties to the parents who came. Okay, the children had toast and the parents had bacon butties. It was in the morning. How many of us have, as a parent of young children, been quite challenged in getting your child out of the door by 9 o'clock? Come on, I know we've got some parents here. It is challenging, isn't it? And so what they did was they organised their session so you were welcomed as a couple, the parent and the child or more children, into that session with a bacon butty for the parent, but toast for the children. Very simple, but it worked. It was what the parents needed for support. Okay, moving on. One of the other areas we're interested in looking at is transitions. How do they manage transitions? A new entrant to the group. Now, if you can remember how it feels like to join a group when you don't know anyone, it can be quite challenging. Do people come over and say hello? Or do you have to sit with your child and wait for someone to say, oh, come and join us? is there a procedure to actually ensure that new entrants are welcomed? We're hopefully going to look at how do parents leave the group, because if you think about it, a parent may leave the community toddler group, but they may have another child. So that they need to leave the community toddler group knowing that they can come back. Okay. Also, if we know that the success of community toddler groups is about word of mouth, then leaving the group has got to be a celebration for that parent as well. So it's very much about positiveness. And again, simple thing like on arrival, how are they greeted on arrival, and at closing, do people know their names? Do the community toddler group leaders know the names of the parents as well as the children? All of those things make a big difference. Okay, we looked at space, and as Alex said, a lot of the community toddler groups are based in church halls. They're sometimes called pack away. Okay, and that means they have to pack away all the equipment, all the arts materials, and have to pack it away in cupboards. It's quite challenging how you can actually use the space. And I've got to say, one of the interesting uses of spaces I found in a church hall was they had the majority of the work that the children and the parents were playing in the church hall, but actually the story time, they went inside the worship space. And it was really, and I thought, actually that's quite encouraging, that use of space, that it was demystifying a church hall for the parents. Lovely to see. In comfort, okay? Don't know about you, but some of us who have been sitting on children's chairs for too long can be quite difficult getting up with your knees, okay? So we were looking at comfort. We were also looking at support for emergent independence of the child from the parent. We know as early childhood practitioners that part of the issues we have for children is their lack of resilience. Okay, in other words, if a situation is too challenging for them, they refuse to engage in it. And certainly that's becoming more and more of an issue. I suppose in some ways, Zoe Nikiforido's first talk was on the cotton wool child, and that links in with that. But in these community toddler groups, what we can do is enable children to take their first steps in independence in a way that the parent feels secure. There's enough adults around that the child can go and explore. Okay? So space there is actually a way of looking at this idea of emergent independence and building up a resilience. Okay? Then we looked at interactions. So we looked at child-child interactions. How were children able to interact with each other? And if you think about it, children, the age of 3 months, would have the opportunity, in a cot or in a carry cot or whatever, to have some form of interaction with older children. In a community toddler group, parents will commonly take a new baby along with their toddler at 2 or 2.5. So there's that chance for actually those interactions as well. And I'm sure anyone who's seen a new baby knows how interested, how attentive they are to the behaviour of other children. They are much more interested in other children than they are what adults are doing. So we looked at child-parent. How is the child-parent relationship encouraged to be positive? Okay. Then we looked at parent-parent. What support can parents offer other parents? And then we looked at staff-parent and we looked at staff-child. So for each of these indices, we will create a scale that shows not so good practice and opposed to best practice, and we will check this out. Activities. Okay, what kind of activities are going on? What kind of shared activities are going on? And interestingly, in some of the toddler groups, you could see how parents were encouraged to react and interact with their children, possibly on activities that they wouldn't be doing at home. We had a number of parents who were saying, oh, she loves painting, but I can't have painting in my flat, it's too small. Or, she loves Play-Doh, but I can't have Play-Doh because it'll be trodden in the carpet and I'll never get it off. Oh, but the parents could see how you could manage those activities in a positive way, so that the child's love of learning, particular interest in an area, could be supported at home without it being a trauma. Okay? Then we looked at independent activities. What kind of things were the children encouraged to do themselves? Looked at adult-led activities. Quite often these were craft activities, but they might be singing, they might be reading a story. Okay? And then we looked at gross, fine, motor activities that the children were encouraged to do, because quite often there were things like buggies in the church hall. There were other things like that that children were encouraged to do. Inclusion was one of the other ones that we are looking at. We're looking at support for children with disabilities. And in that, I was particularly interested with one grandfather who took his grandson with Down syndrome to one of the community toddler groups, and it was really heartwarming to hear. He said he took his grandchild to the toddler group not only for the grandchild to get used to the children in his community, but for the community to grow up with his grandchild. So that when he started school, he would always already be seen as someone in that community. And I thought that was very strong in terms of inclusion. Then it was support for parents with disabilities as well. Okay. Then the other question was diversity of our attendees. In these toddler groups, parents can talk with other people who might be grandparents if they're not in contact with their own parents themselves. So you could have a cross-generation effect. We also found that there were people who were professional carers, childminders, quite often would go to a community toddler group, and they would talk to other parents who maybe it was their first child, so they weren't sure what they could do. Whereas a childminder is a professional, but it's a home-based setting. Okay? So certainly in terms of inclusion, we felt community toddler groups were actually getting a more diverse range of people attending them. It wasn't just parents with problems who were going. It was parents with young children. And so it meant that there wasn't this divide of people with problems and people not. It was actually just people with a common situation. And that was very strong. Then we're looking at parental support. How does the group feel? Okay, and how do you encourage a sense of welcome, a sense of community? Do people talk about some of their friends in the community who've gone to that toddler group? Those kind of things. The flexibility of staff. Okay. We're also going to look at confidentiality, because support can only be as strong as a parent feels that their conversation with a community toddler group leader is not going to lead to social services being called. So it's quite a complex situation to be in. And then this idea of shared space for conversation. So is there somewhere where parents can talk to other parents in confidence if they're worried about their child, if they're worried about their child's development of language? It's quite common for parents of first children not to understand that your child might be slightly delayed in language. If that's your first child, that's all you've got experience of. Okay? But actually coming into contact with children from a different range of people, then you can see that, okay, maybe I need to do some more work on that. We looked at the informal home learning environment. Now this is something that is currently very, very popular, and it's this idea the home learning environment is crucial for a child's learning and development at school. Okay, so we were looking at how does the community toddler group make links with the home. Quite often if the children were making something, they would take that thing home. So the parent would have a link so the child could make links with what was going on at home and what was going on in the group. But there was interesting other things as well. So it was things like music, it was things like nursery rhymes, it was things like songs. The parents, I don't know about you, but when you first have a child, do you remember the nursery rhymes or the songs that you had? In the toddler group, the leaders would be singing nursery rhymes, would be singing songs that helped the parents remember the ones that they may have heard when they were younger. So they were more likely to be able to use those with their own children. Okay? And we're talking about people who may not have bought a book on nursery rhymes, may not have bought a book on songs you can sing with your child, because that's not what they did in their family. Okay? So we looked at music, we looked at creativity, explained that a child may have an interest in art, may have an interest in Play-Doh, those kind of things. Literacy, we know that the more times a child hears a story, the more they tune into book language. Once they've tuned into book language and shown an interest in books, then they're more likely to learn to read later. And that interest in books is usually engendered, if they haven't got any books at home, by observing other children enjoy books. Children are great imitators. If they see another child enjoy books that they're not familiar with, then they are more likely to do that. So we looked at numeracy because there were number rhymes, all of those kind of things. Personal, social, emotional development, again, having to share, having to take turns. And actually, for the children, this was important that the parents understood, as Alex said about discipline. How do other children learn how to take turns? How do they manage to negotiate issues? In somewhere as free as a community toddler group, those children will have more experiences of connecting with a wide range of children. They will learn about their social environment. And then, interesting in looking at understanding the world, and that's particularly for some faith groups, it was really important that the children understood part of their faith as well. So, again, these are the beginnings. And what we're going to do is try to create this rating index using the indices to help people identify A, what works, but B, how they can move their practice on. So these are some of the ideas, but we're working on them. It's a work in progress. But I've got to say it's extremely interesting. Well, because it's made me think very differently about the community toddler group I went to when my children were little. Okay. All right.
Okay. Any questions? It would be good if you do have a question, if we could say it into this microphone, because then it's recorded on the video. Maybe there aren't. It's fine.
Go on.
So I find it very interesting to hear about it and everything. It's fascinating, thank you. But I'm interested to know, so the research that you did was with community-run toddler groups rather than actual Sure Start centres. Yes. So I would just be kind of interested what people would say who do attend Sure Start centres, why they do attend them. I don't know if that...
Right, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
What's happened is the government has reduced funding massively for children's centres. In some authorities, they have been pared to the very bone. So the children's centres only offer what we call targeted services, so that they are the at-risk families. In Birkenhead, it was the at-risk families who deliberately chose not to go to Sure Start centres, children's centres, because it was a label. And thinking about the research as well, if you're only going to go to a group of people who have the same issues, where's the learning can only come from the professional. Whereas in the community toddler groups, because it truly is a universal provision, it doesn't matter if you live in a big 4-bedroom detached house or a little terrace around the corner. It's that mix, it's the children that are in the community. And it is this idea of big society. It is truly working. But yes, I think it's very interesting. The aim behind Sure Start Children's Centres was one children's centre for every community. And it would potentially have worked. Although I still think they've got a lot to learn from community toddler groups, because there's this idea, if you're slightly worried that something's wrong, if you're not managing something well, is it not easier to talk to someone just sitting down when you're having a cup of tea, as opposed to going to a session where you feel that you've now admitted that you're doing something wrong, and that undermines your confidence even more, your stress levels even more. So what we were finding was that the parental mental health and well-being was impacting on the warmth and sensitivity that parents were having to their children. And it's true for us all. If we feel more relaxed because our needs are being met, then we can more likely meet the needs of others. But I think it's a really interesting one. And in fact, I'd love to actually potentially look at what's happening in children's centres as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we asked every single parent that we interviewed if they went to the children's centre, and none of them did, not one. So you're right, we didn't actually go to the children's centres because of the Foundation Years Project. They'd said we have these big glossy children's centres and they are empty. So go and find out why then these people aren't going. I guess to stay open, there has to be a couple of parents who go, so it'd be interesting to know who actually does go and if they are these yummy mummies instead. So maybe that's, as you say, a different area of the research that we should be looking at.
Yeah, but it was interesting. It came out, the thing that was successful was the community toddler groups. So what we've done is focus on the community toddler groups to see, well, actually, maybe children's centres can learn from them as well.
Well, firstly, I want to get the name of the community group that does bacon butties, because I live on the Wirral.
It's over in the Wirral.
Yeah, I live on the Wirral, so I've got a toddler, so I think I'm going to.
Great idea.
Yeah, brilliant. Just thinking about the idea that you think that places like children's centres and Sure Start could learn from community groups. Would there be any scope for you to share this then with children's centres in terms of what you're finding and how they could maybe use that, or because of sort of the nature of them, would they be open to?
I think they would. Sorry, Alex. Some of the people we've done other research with at Liverpool Hope have been children's centre managers in a different local authority, and they have interestingly mentioned that they are now looking at community toddler groups themselves. But we've got some of the, maybe not the full answers, but we're working on that way. And I think that would be really good. So that would have a huge impact.
And also one thing that we have been really lucky to be invited to was the Birkenhead Foundation Years Annual General Meeting, where our results were published, and the local authority leaders were there, which was great, and they specifically came and asked us for the research that we had published off the back of that. Now, we kind of need to get up the guts to go back to them and go, so what did you think? Which we haven't done yet, but they did specifically ask for the findings because the Foundation Years Project had been so interested with the results that we'd found. So the LA were there, and they did hear about this, and as I say, they have requested them. But we need to try and link back with the Birkenhead Years, Foundation Years Project to say, have you had any feedback from them now?
Yeah, so, yeah. I think early days, but a lot of potential for us.
Anything else? Nope. Brilliant. All right. Well, we just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for coming, for all three of you for coming. We really do appreciate it. And it's really helpful to have the questions because it makes us think, because we do really want this research to have impact. So thank you for giving up your time. We really do appreciate it. Oh, Brill. Wait. Here's the microphone.
I didn't know if I'd be a valid candidate to ask a question because I don't have children, but my mother has lots, so I've obviously got experience from that, and she attends these groups as well, whereby like a child can play on the soft play mats and stuff like that, and she can have a break and everything. And I think with the children's centres, it does sound glossier. It does sound perhaps more connected to the authorities and professionalism, as you were saying in the lecture. So I was wondering what you were going to do about the exposure. So how are you going to advertise, perhaps, yourselves more?
Ooh, I'll let you say that.
I think that's a really interesting question, because that's one of the things that we want to do in the next step, is think about, okay, how do we support these community toddler groups to do all these different things, the kind of inventory that we were looking at. And one of those things is publicity, actually. You know, when parents have their child for the first time, are the midwives or the health visitors who go and see them talking about the community toddler groups as well as the children's centre, which they may not want to access. So it's thinking about that, and it's obviously it's not about us publicising these groups, but it's actually supporting the practitioners from our research to think about how they can actually do that. So I think it's a really good challenge, and it's a challenge that we need to think about in terms of developing this index. So thank you.
Is there no way that you could collaborate with the actual toddler groups as well, and perhaps bring them from the coldness of the churches to the actual centres, the empty centres, perhaps?
Yeah, I think the problem with the centres is that they often want trained professionals, whatever that
What
looks
does
like.
that mean?
Qualifications.
Could you actually not provide these people with the qualifications to ensure that it could happen?
Yeah.
Because that's community-based, isn't it?
It is. I think the thing that's attractive, that we were finding is attractive to these parents, is they don't want qualifications. They don't want gloss. They don't want something that they're accessing because potentially we have to go to that because we're not good enough parents. They quite liked, you know, well, the church halls weren't cold, but the idea of a cold church hall where all the toys are a little bit grubby, but actually it's really informal. There's not someone in an Airtex top with a little logo. And I think maybe if you tried to transport that community into the children's centres, maybe it wouldn't work. I don't know. But these are the kind of things that these children's centres need to be thinking through.
Yeah, we can lead the discussions, most definitely.
Yeah.
Also, often I was just going to say church halls are often bigger than children's centres. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah,
That's very true.
the space.
Experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very well utilised space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks. Really
Excellent.
appreciate your time.